We're going to talk about sustainable mobility and renewables. Now, let's start with you, CY, because Yinson, obviously we know, has evolved from offshore energy in one of Southeast Asia's leading green mobility players. But you've moved a lot. You've had a real transformation, haven't you? Because Yinson's legacy essentially was oil and gas, and now you've shifted to sustainable mobility. So tell us about this shift and how important it is.
I think it's not a full shift to sustainable mobility, but it's really looking at where our legacy businesses are and how we can complement using the future infrastructure. And I think our legacy business of oil and gas infrastructure is here to stay, unless we can consume less energy. We heard in the earlier panel, AI will consume a lot of energy.
Of course.
So I think we are here to have our legacy businesses still intact, but saying that we need to move and look into what future infrastructure is required for a shift to a sustainable mobility. And I guess what we think is something that's future-proof is something that's inclusive, right? And it needs to bring down the cost of mobility, really, for everyone on the planet, right? And being clean is an advantage, but I think bring down the cost of mobility is the key. I think over the years we've seen in the EV development, and it's crossed the bump that there's now enough economies of scale to bring mobility lower. On top of that, better user experience on an EV. But what's lacking is the infrastructure build-out, right? And I thought at Yinson we could, because of our roots in oil and gas, it's very complementary for us to move into the charging infra and enable this shift, and that's going to be inclusive for everyone and help everybody bring down the cost of mobility. I think that's why we are building out that infrastructure. On top of that, we've seen battery prices go down. We've also moved into electric vessels, right? We've been building, and one of we launched our electric vessel yesterday in Singapore. Our first commercial one that's going to be used in Singapore. But so I think all these it's a step in how we bring mobility lower, so it's sustainable in that sense, cheaper. But cleaner is a bonus that comes with it.
Absolutely, wow, that's really game-changing, isn't it? To launch your first green vessel, in a country like Singapore, which obviously is a massive port, one of the world's biggest, in fact, the biggest, transshipment port in the world still. Now, Jaime, it's a similar story with you because ACMobility also made a shift. It was in automotive retail and now into what you're doing now. So tell us about this shift and what prompted it and what are you looking forward to in terms of what it might achieve?
Thanks, Sharanjit, for the question. I just wanted to start also by thanking the organizers of Mastercard for inviting myself, participating in such a great panel with CY and yourself, Sharanjit, and to be talking about this subject. As you had mentioned, Sharanjit, we had traditionally been in the very traditional automotive distribution business for some time. But when we were looking at a variety of different factors that were changing, I think something that we had recognized was that the shift towards sustainable mobility is really a shift towards an ecosystem. It's not so much just being competitive at the upfront price and making that accessible to the customer, but also ensuring that the various touch points that customers have with their mobility ecosystem becomes much more affordable and much more convenient. And so we felt it was necessary, if what our goal is to create a much more inclusive mobility ecosystem, is we needed to participate in all parts of that life cycle of the vehicle, not only just from the point of purchase, but also other costs associated with that life cycle. So in the ACMobility portfolio, we do have distribution contracts. We are in retail as well, but we've also developed an EV charging network throughout the country, as well as some aftermarket services. And what's really important there, I think, is that we really feel that although this has been traditionally seen as a premium ecosystem, I think really established by Tesla and the excitement that was generated in the US with that transition, is that we really feel that this is an inclusive ecosystem because it can be much more affordable, and it also can provide other benefits, particularly in terms of sustainability. And so we felt it was necessary to be an end-to-end platform because we wanted to provide value at each of those segments. In terms of accessibility, we don't have any manufacturing capabilities right now, but we've partnered with global leading OEMs that can bring the right kinds of products that are relevant for the Philippine market. We have the privilege of working on a distribution basis, also retail basis, with both BYD and Kia. We find that these are two OEMs that are very forward-looking. They're very competitive in terms of their battery pricing and their manufacturing costs in a way that can be accessible to the Filipino public. But not only that, they also have portfolios that have a wide breadth. And so if you really want to affect change in the mobility space, particularly in the Philippines, where the passenger vehicle segment is somewhat fragmented across many models, we needed to partner with global leading OEMs that had the portfolio breadth of that. So that was a primary concern there. I think secondly, to contribute to the total cost of ownership of vehicles is participating in the EV charging system, which I had mentioned before. We've started out by developing an EV charging network in the Philippines that's relatively modest to start. We're going to end the year, hopefully, developing 700 charging points across the country. The goal is to really catalyze this space, is to really demonstrate that range anxiety is not a primary concern and that it can be solved with the right partnerships and really with the right strategies in place. So our objective with our EV charging ecosystem by the end of this year is to have 700 charge points throughout the country, really just developing an EV spine from the north to the south of the Philippines. And that's really just the start.
Yeah.
I'll also say, as a last point, that we felt it was necessary to invest in other aspects of the ecosystem and to innovate in spaces where there are gaps. Sure. We've developed an EMSP app in the country, which allows users to discover the EV charging stations and engage with them in a unique way. And we've also worked with other partners around ASEAN, who we feel have gone through similar pain points. One example of that is we've partnered with a very unique Singaporean entity called Power Up, who have essentially a fast charging capability that can be delivered on demand through a truck. And that's very important because there are some limitations with the infrastructure in the Philippines. And so where those gaps occur, we can send this innovative technology that we've learned from our ASEAN partners. And so through this combination of leveraging assets in the existing portfolio at Ayala, understanding how different markets in ASEAN have approached these pain points and innovated out of them, we feel that we're on pace right now to begin transforming and hopefully provide confidence with the consumer to adopting this type of technology.
That's extraordinary.
And at the risk of just expanding a little bit more, I think just to make the point why I think it's relevant in the Philippines in particular, in the Philippines, we are a country that doesn't necessarily have access to a large-scale indigenous energy resources. So therefore, we've had to import a significant amount of fuel, and that has had an impact on fuel inflation for the average Filipino consumer. By creating this ecosystem and by addressing costs of power and making it affordable for individuals, we can include a lot of different demographics into this ecosystem. Yeah. And that's why I think we've seen a tremendous uptake in new energy vehicles and EVs in the Philippines. Right. 2 years ago, that penetration rate was less than 1%. To date, right now, it's nearly tracking 4 to 6%. So
that's a big number. Yeah. We'll stop there. That's an extraordinary amount of growth. But what I'm hearing from both of you is it's really extraordinary. You have listed out a whole series of things that obviously ACMobility is doing, as well CY with Yinson. But what's interesting is what I'm hearing from both of you is this real need to bring down the cost of energy, as you both have said, and that is ultimately around, of course, sharing the prosperity around with EVs, the whole notion of inclusivity that we've been talking about, inclusive growth, which is the theme of this conference. So tell us, CY, I mean, obviously, as Yinson tries to expand its EV infrastructure, what have you learned about balancing those environmental ambitions with the financial realities? Because if you want to bring the cost of energy down, you guys are going to have to undertake a lot, and it's going to cost you money, right? So respond to that, and then I'll go off to Jaime after that.
I think we need to engage our investors, right? Investors' patience are never too long when you tell them we're going to bleed for a perpetual time, right? So I think that's number one, right? We need to engage our investors and guide them through how we're going to invest in a new infrastructure, right? I think that's one. The key with what's your question again?
Well, it's just about how do you make money from trying to push the EV with all the infrastructure that you're putting into place. This is a difficult challenge.
Yeah, so I think we need to explain to our investors on that, and really where our government's policy has been is net neutral in 2030. So stepping a progressive installation, progressive investment into the EV charging space, not too early, not too late, right? Is the key. And I think we've learned that one of the key things we learned that EV infrastructure is infrastructure business. It is not a technology business. You're not going to make 100% next year, right? Yeah. We've seen stock prices go up and down. It is a very long-term business, and matching the right amount of the right capital structure, being long-dated, cheap, stable capital is very important, rather than venture capital, which is not the right capital structure for an infrastructure. I mean, these infrastructure are not going to get you a lot of returns in a short period of time. So I think what we've learned is to rightly match the right capital structure with government regulations and engage the investors. I think that's the key things that we've learned.
Yeah. Crucial. Of course, these are all lessons that one learns along the way. But Jaime, I was going to ask a question around adoption, but you talked a little bit about that, some of the challenges within the Philippines. How do you scale up adoption for EVs? You talked about that spine from north to south, the EV spine. So I'm going to push ahead and talk about innovation next, which is, of course, not just about technology. It's about leadership. It's about, obviously, the kinds of innovation within companies across sectors that will determine whether Southeast Asia can truly build sustainable and affordable mobility. Do you believe that is possible?
Yeah,
absolutely.
Absolutely.
Political capital for what you're doing?
Absolutely. And I think that, I think CY makes actually an excellent point that, you have to confront the reality that the infrastructure space is not necessarily going to give you massive returns to start. When you talk about the EV ecosystem, you often talk about whether is there a chicken or an egg problem? Are you going to build the infrastructure first, or are you going to sell the vehicles first? And I think in our case, we felt that we wanted to be a catalyzing force for this space, and we needed to do a little bit of both. In terms of innovation, really to simplify it, the objective that we're trying to create is a much more inclusive, much more sustainable ecosystem, right, that can attract customers from many different demographics. And I think as a leader, what's really important for us is to ensure that we are providing the right products, the right services at the various points that are most costly for the individuals through the life cycle of their vehicles. And when you think about the total cost of ownership, it's really a sum of the upfront cost of the vehicle plus the costs associated in terms of maintenance as well as power consumption. And so I think it's very encouraging for us to see actually where battery innovation is going, because that's actually providing tremendous value in the upfront cost. It's opening up the doors for many individuals from various different economic demographics to be involved in this ecosystem. I think if you have a long-term view of it, battery innovation has progressed tremendously. Since 2008, I believe battery prices have gone down by nearly 90%.
Wow.
If you look at the last perhaps 5 years or so, battery prices have been decreasing at nearly 20 to 30%. And so that is very, very encouraging, because it does seem that we're getting to a point where these vehicles already at this point are becoming quite competitive from an upfront cost basis. Secondly, though, as I think when that deals with the upfront cost component of the total cost of ownership. But when you look at the charging ecosystem, there's a lot of innovation there. I spoke briefly about the partnership that we've had with the Singaporean entity to deliver power literally directly on demand. That's one form of innovation that's important. It's really only viable if it's at a discount to the traditional fuel counterparts. And at this point, it does seem so. But I do want to make a reference that we are living in ASEAN. This is a developing region in and of itself. And that does not necessarily mean that there aren't components of infrastructure that we can leverage on. This is actually at least in the Philippines, quite a digitally sophisticated population. We have over 80% smartphone penetration for those that have SIM cards. And it's a population that's quite digitally savvy. I think one example of showcasing how we can provide a lower total cost of ownership utilizing digital infrastructure is the partnership that we've had with GCash, which is the leading e-wallet in the Philippines, developed by one of the Ayala Group companies, joint venture with Singtel called Globe Telecom. Yeah. There's over 90 million registered users on GCash. It's a very dynamic platform.
And one utilized by a lot of women running SMEs, I know, because I've talked to them. And that's, again, inclusive growth. It's about bringing everyone with you.
It's a great point, Sharanjit. Yeah. Thank you for highlighting that. Then the emphasis that I wanted to make is that it's an app, actually, that cuts across many demographics, as you just highlighted. It doesn't matter what economic demographic you belong to. You're likely using that app. Yeah. We've integrated the payments ecosystem into that app in a way that becomes much more dynamic. For example, if a user were to engage with a particular charging station over a period of time, we could theoretically give him a discount after a certain period.
Okay.
If, for example, you are a user that plugs in your car while you go to watch a movie in the mall and have a meal, and you don't have enough cash left in your wallet, there's a buy now, pay later feature within that wallet that pays for that charging session.
Some really great features, but I'm going to have to jump in. We have 15 seconds. So I'm going to ask a really quick question to both of you. If you can keep your answers very brief, that would be great. And the question, obviously, is looking back 5 years from now, 2030, and you're looking back over the next 5 years, the previous 5 years, what single milestone will tell you that Southeast Asia's mobility transition is truly underway? What is the one thing?
I think ASEAN has so many things going for ASEAN, right? We've got a solid banking system in Singapore. We've got good natural resources. We've got sun. We've got wind in Vietnam, right? But we need to connect ASEAN, and I think having countries at different stage of growth and putting them together has been very difficult. But if one day we can get things like the Asia power grid transmission connecting countries together, we will be able to tap on the solid financial capacity of Singapore. We've got a lot of hydropower in Laos. We've got wind in Vietnam. We've got solar throughout ASEAN. And if we can put all this together, we should be able to get cheap, reliable, sustainable power to the whole of ASEAN. And I think that will really springboard our sustainable mobility ambitions.
And that's a truly inspirational story, the ASEAN Power Grid.
Yeah, I'll keep my answer relatively brief here. Yeah. I think one good indication, because there's a lot of investments across the ecosystem, into the charging stations, digital infrastructure, whatnot, all of that should be creating confidence in the consumer to adopt this kind of technology. So I think one of the key metrics really to look at is the penetration of new energy vehicles sold per year. If you can cross the 50% threshold within the next 5 years, I think that's a lot of momentum to push back from. And I think that's an important milestone to indicate that really this is the future of mobility.
The future of mobility. You have heard it here from these two extraordinary individuals. Please, a round of applause. You're looking at the future here for EVs, for green technology. It's been a real pleasure speaking to both of you. Excellent. Thank you both.